I want to welcome everybody to what is the 9th year of seminars for the Friedberg Economics Institute, but it's actually the 10-year anniversary. The Institute was founded, I believe, in 2014. So if I'm doing my math right, and now it's 2023. And while there weren't necessarily seminars or activity during COVID years, at least in my family, we continued to count birthdays during COVID. There were birthdays. No interruptions. Okay, fantastic. So it's an honor to be here amongst some of the leading thinkers and practitioners on economic freedom. It's a great honor to be with my friend and mentor Dov, who Bob introduced previously, who's the visionary behind everything that you're going to experience. And it's a great honor to be with Program Director Bob, whose tireless effort organizing the seminar and putting it together, I think, is very noteworthy. So, thank you, Bob. And to my dear friend Russ Roberts. Where's Russ? I don't know. Oh, you're hiding in the back. I like that. There you go. Okay.
I forgot to say that you're on the board of Shalem. You could say it.
I am on the board of Shalem College as well. Okay, there, I said it. Okay, excellent. Okay, good. Bob and Dov did something amazing this past September that I just want to note, which is that they put together a seminar for students from the Abraham Accords countries. And we had, I think it was 11 students from a combination of Morocco, Bahrain, and the Emirates. And I got to speak to that group at a dinner in Jerusalem. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Not to take away from when a room is filled with Israelis, it's equally amazing. But I want to point you to the fact that I think they're planning to host a seminar in Abu Dhabi in September. So if you know, you'll be alumni by then. If you know of fellow people who would be appropriate for that type of seminar, I would encourage you to send those people to Bob. So when I look around the room, I see an amazing faculty, and one person stands out, and that's me. I'm not an economist. I'm not a professor. This is a great disclaimer, by the way. I do a lot of legal disclaimers on my investment talks, right? We won't guarantee anything. I'm not a research fellow. I'm not an MBA. I'm not even a BA. I am a college dropout. I don't advise that for anybody, but I am. I don't advise governments formally. I do informally, but not formally. And I don't produce research. So the question is, why am I here? And I will answer the question very simply. I am here because of free markets and economic freedom. So I am a living example of everything that you're about to learn and be introduced to. And over the next few minutes, we're going to talk about a few things. One is, what is economic freedom? Basic principles. The second is, why is it important to Israel? And the third is, what does it have to do with my life? So as a bit of background, high level, I am the CEO and founder, and Bob just made me the chairman, so I'm going to go to my partners tomorrow and tell them that I've been promoted to chairman of Exigent Capital. We're an investment firm with offices in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Bahrain. I am married. I have 5 children. I live in Jerusalem, and I made Aliyah in 2007. So let's talk about economic freedom. What is economic freedom? Economic freedom is the ability to engage in voluntary economic activity on your own free will that is free of excessive government regulation or regulation of any type. It rests on a certain number of pillars. You have the rule of law, property rights, free trade, movement of labor. All of those types of things, when they're at their best, support economic freedom. In practical terms, economic freedom relates to the ability of a citizen, like any one of us in the room, to find a wage, which means just get a job, start a business, and support your family. That's the basics of economic freedom. Now, we take it for granted, but in a lot of the world, those fundamental principles don't exist. Talk for a second about economic freedom and immigration. In countries with high levels of immigration, like Israel, and we're going to get to it, immigration with an I, meaning people are coming in, economic freedom is of the utmost importance. And I'll tell you why. Immigrants usually start, when they come into a country, from a lower point of economic security. Their ability to have a successful outcome in that new country rests on their ability to earn a livelihood. It's pretty obvious. Historically, a person or a family would move from one country to another. Why? To seek better economic opportunity. They wanted to seek a new way of life. The Western world was called the New World that all the immigrants were trying to go to. Sitting here, we actually have an outlier in our country. We have an odd dynamic, which is we have an influx of very wealthy immigrants coming in. That is a historic aberration, and it's related to the uniqueness of Jewish history and the longing to be in a specific place. But it's also driven by the economic freedom in Israel, because that created a society and a place where successful and happy people would actually want to leave successful and happy places and move to what used to be a desert in the Middle East. I'm going to share a few statistics with you about the role of immigrants in the world economy, which most people don't realize how significant they are. The connection between Israel and its level of economic freedom, and then tie those things together, the connection between Israel, economic freedom, and immigration. So when we talk about immigration in the world economy, according to the UN in 2020, there were 281 million migrants/immigrants, which was 3.6% of the world's population. Okay, so if this room represented the world, between 3 and 4 people would be immigrants. There's more in this room, and I'll explain to you why. According to McKinsey, which is the smartest organization in the world, immigrants contribute about 10% of global GDP. Within the OECD, 25% of all entrepreneurs, 25% of all new businesses are founded by immigrants. And in the US, very famous companies like Apple, Google, Tesla were either founded directly by immigrants or by first-generation immigrants. So let's talk about Israel and its level of economic freedom. Okay? We're widely known as a culture of innovation, of technology, development. We have the second highest number of startups in the world after the US. I feel like when you're Israeli, you get your Teudat Zahut, and you know how many startups Israel has relative to the US. Like, those are the two things you know. But I'll go a bit deeper. According to the Heritage Foundation, they did an index of economic freedom in 2020. Israel ranks higher than France, Italy, and Greece. And we're not that far behind the US and the UK in economic freedom. Something that is remarkable about Israel, that I think is a relatively new stat, is Israel just passed the UK in something called GDP per capita, which means everyone in this room is producing more or contributing more to the economy than your friend who's sitting in London. That's pretty remarkable. Let's tie this all together, okay? Given that the state of Israel is not yet 75 years old, but given what's going on, we'll hopefully get there in a few months, almost every citizen of this country is within 1 or 2 generations of being an immigrant. Within the OECD, Israel is 4th in immigration. 26% of our country are immigrants. 26% of our country are immigrants. It's an unbelievable statistic. Since the state's founding, 3.3 million people have made aliyah. According to the Israel Innovation Authority, 43% of Israel's high-tech sector are immigrants. According to Startup Nation Central, 90% of all high-tech companies in Israel have at least one founder who's an immigrant. Great companies here, like Waze and Checkpoint, were all founded by immigrants or people who were one generation removed. And there's something even more remarkable that these stats don't account for, and that actually represent most of the amazing brains in this room, which is the academic achievements of the immigrants in this country. So you can give a lot of great statistics about businesses, but our rate of Nobel Prize winners, so on and so forth, and our academic contributions to math, to science, to philosophy are equally as impressive. And much of that was driven by the wave of Russian immigration in the 80s and the 90s. And one thing I can tell you for sure is that the Russians who came in the 80s and 90s were not coming to buy a holiday home in Herzliya or Renana. They were coming for a better life and for economic freedom. So the question is, how does this all relate to me? So I will tell you a little bit of my family story, not long, 2 minutes. So my grandparents were all refugees from the Shoah. They arrived in the US with nothing except some clothing that were given to them by the US Army and the tattoos that are now famous that were on their arms. My father's father worked in a furniture store making beds. So he would literally take something like this and nail the wood together on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And my mother's parents started a business in Brooklyn selling kosher food. My bubby was famous for making kigel or kugel, and actually she's buried in Rehovot, and on her matzeva, they write very nice things about the person, and the Rashi Tevot of the sentence is spelled kugel, which is very interesting. I'll send you a picture. So they had economic freedom when they arrived to the United States, and that afforded them the ability to give my parents a very basic education. They went to City College, and neither of them graduated, by the way. My parents each started their own business. My father sold fax machines. It might be hard to explain what a fax machine was, but you put a piece of paper into this thing, and a piece of paper with the same thing would come out on the other side over a phone line. Okay. Anyway, that's what he did. And my mother opened a woman's clothing store. That allowed them to educate me and my siblings. My brother became a senior engineer at Google, who already sold a number of high-tech companies. He now lives in Miami with his boyfriend, where he builds airplanes in his living room, like airplanes, like real airplanes. And my sister is an accomplished nutritionist, and she married a great guy who also started a business by himself after college. And his parents were olim to the United States from Brazil. They were seeking a better life. So the question is, how did I get here? So even though I was raised in the US and educated there, I made Aliyah at the age of 30. It was economic freedom in Israel that actually allowed me to establish myself and to be here in front of you today. So my Zaidi, the one who was actually making the kugel that we gave my bubby all the credit for on the matzeva, took a few $100s from his business in the 1980s, and he started investing in the stock market. And every Sunday, my parents would drive us to Brooklyn from where we lived in Riverdale, and my Zaidi would show me the book that he had with all of the stocks. And it was a few $100s, it became a few $1,000s, at most it became a few tens of thousands of dollars. But it inspired me to what I knew could be possible in a world of economic freedom. So I came to Israel in 1995 after my year in high school. And there was an intifada that year, so they didn't let us out of yeshiva. And the one place they let us go was to the mall. So my friends and I would take the bus to Malcha Mall, and we would try to not get in trouble. Unfortunately, they didn't sell any alcohol in Malcha Mall. It would have been a lot more fun for us. But they did have a store called Steimatsky. And I went into Steimatsky, and I said, you know what? If I can't get drunk with my friends, maybe I'll just read a book. And I was not at a very high academic level at that point, as you could probably imagine. And they have these books in English, probably many languages, called The Idiot's Guide to Something. So if you know nothing about anything, or about a specific topic, you buy the Idiot's Guide to that thing and you read it, and then you sound a little bit intelligent. So I went into Steinmatsky and there were two books. There was the Idiot's Guide to Investing and the Idiot's Guide to Cooking. Now, given my Bobby and her kugel and my Zadie and his stocks, it was a very tough decision. And I am very, very happy, Toda La'el, that I picked, for whatever reason, in my infinite wisdom at that point, the Idiot's Guide to Investing. And I spent the rest of my year in Israel understanding the basic principles of investing. I went back to New York. This is 1997. And that summer, I attained my first securities licenses at the age of 19, Series 7, 50, 55, and 63. And I became a stockbroker at the age of 20. I later attended Yeshiva University. I studied finance. I didn't finish there. I did get to head the student-run investment fund, which had a record year that year. It wasn't because I was good at investing. It was because everything went up. But sometimes that makes you a genius. I then got recruited by JP Morgan. I went through their global markets training and trading program. I traded FX and interest rates for a while. And in 2007, I was working for a private real estate company in the United States. And the two principals offered me to make Aliyah. And I took it. So I came to Israel with my wife, and we had 2 children then. And in 2008, something really bad happened, which was called the credit crisis. And I woke up one morning sitting in Israel without life savings, without a family fortune to fall back on, and without a job. And I don't have a network from the army. I don't speak Hebrew. Well, I didn't speak Hebrew fluently back then. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going back to America. I'm going to stay here. And I'm going to figure it out. So I did what anyone would do, which was I started a hedge fund. And that's how Exogen Capital was born. We were 2 people working in a basement apartment on Rehov Berlin in Yerushalayim, Rehov Harav Berlin. And the first thing we did was participate in 2009 in a US government bailout program of the bond market called the Term Asset-Backed Secured Loan Facility. We raised about $25 million in equity, and we leveraged it up to about $350 million worth of bonds in this program. It seemed perfectly rational at the time. Looking back, I realized how much leverage we used and how risky the trade was, but it worked. And it started our firm on a 15-year trajectory that has been incredible. We now have investments in real estate, in the consumer sector. We're partners with the Bezos family. We've invested in medical technology companies, specifically in a company called Insightec, which is the world leader in non-invasive brain surgery. We're the operating partner of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. And we are very soon going to be announcing, although it's not public, that a very senior business figure from the Gulf will be joining us as a partner. And when that is announced, it will be the most senior business executive from the Gulf to join an Israeli firm, and we are going to be very, very proud of that. So what's the point of telling you about my life story? It's that I am here today because my Zadie was able to open a chicken store in New York that also sold delicious kugel, and that I was able to start an investment company in a basement in Jerusalem. So I am a living example for all of you of why economic freedom and free markets in Israel is absolutely critical for all of you to learn about and to maintain.